This next exercise is an essential strategy to help you hit your 3-year target. I found that, I learned this in business and business strategy, and it really helped me start to think a lot more clearly about what exactly my critical issues are. When you have a target that you're trying to hit, right? Here you are, and you've got your bow and arrow, and you're trying to shoot your arrow at the target. You really want to know like all things that are contributing to this situation. And the SWOT helps you do that. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A lot of what we're learning in Mastery of You is an iterative cycle to get clear on what your ambitions are and to be able to develop a strategy and then to take action on that strategy, to test that strategy in real time. And when you do that, you find that you'll get better at strategy. Like you'll actually get better at taking aligned action from better strategy. So this first part is really an assessment in light of your deeper dream, in light of your 3-year target. What are some of the strengths that you bring to the table? Sometimes strengths can be broken down also into strengths that are assets or that are relationships, strengths that are skills. These are 3 main categories that I look at. Certain things that are an asset, like for me, for example, if my 3-year target has to do with, let's say, 2x my income and my impact to really make a bigger difference in personal and planetary thrive, what are some of the assets or skills or relationships I might bring to that? I, for example, would bring some things that I've built over time that help me do that. I have a skill in community building. I have an asset in an email list, and I might put the number of people on it. Right now it's about 60K. I have assets in certain relationships that I have from my podcast. So I have leverage and influencers. What you want to think, you've got to have your 3-year target right in front of you. Exactly what is this? You've already written that down. And in light of this target, what are the biggest strengths that you have, assets, relationships, skills, that will help you get there? And this should honestly be the easy part of this, just to list like, what are the things that you've done? Sometimes comparing yourself to other people right now is really super helpful. Like, what do you have that someone else might not have that you could actually leverage? So these strengths are what we're going to want to leverage when we build strategy. Now, I often will jump around and I'll just go right to weaknesses, because often when you're looking at this target, you're like, what is going to make this hard? What is it going to make? Like, what about your 3-year target is really challenging to you? And usually that question in itself will help you highlight your weaknesses. So you could also say that these are challenges. So for instance, for me in the past, I've had a weakness in terms, and again, you can look at assets, relationships, and skills. I've had a weakness in terms of finance. I've had a weakness in terms of administration and understanding that part of growing a company in this case. I've also had a strength, if I go over here, I've had a strength in personal habits and time management. Thanks, Ayurveda. Super handy dandy. I've also had, from this, a certain level of fitness and concentration, that I can deeply concentrate and organize and get things done. A weakness that I had in the past that really got in my way, that was a challenge, was in team building. I wasn't good at team building, particularly around accountability, holding team members accountable for their responsibilities. I wasn't that good at even knowing what people were doing, let alone being able to hold them accountable for that. And honestly, like, these weaknesses stulted my business for many years. So again, in light of your 3-year target, you want to get crystal clear. There's no Pollyannish thinking here. Like, be super honest with yourself. Like, what skills do you not have, like, that are actually a weakness? What relationships do you not have that actually are a weakness? You might not have, for instance, network. You might not have network or networking skills. So network is an asset. The skill related to that is networking skills. What other specific skills do you not have that you are pretty clear that you are going to need in order to hit your 3-year target? And so if you're doing this alongside me, you might just press pause and get some of these down. I'm just giving you an example because I know it's one thing to be walked through an exercise, and it's another thing to see how someone else might do this in light of a very specific target. Now, strengths and weaknesses are both personal to you. Now, there's things that happen outside of you. So that is where opportunities and threats go. So again, this is more external to you. And what's happening above in terms of weaknesses and strengths, this is internal to you. This is what you actually have control over. So many people were surprised when COVID hit and businesses and schools shut down that it was a threat they didn't see coming. Like a global pandemic was something that they didn't see coming, but may have changed the reality of their personal ambitions or their goals. So what's interesting, so global pandemic can actually be a threat. It can also be an opportunity. Like for my business, we've grown a lot. We grew a lot through COVID because of essentially more people were needing to connect online, and our business was set up to do that. So threats, I used to have a really hard time identifying what threats would really be in direct opposition, things that are totally beyond my control, meaning I can't control if they happen or not, but are within my control to be able to respond to. So how we might respond to a global pandemic, how we might respond to, say, climate change and increase of, let's say, tropical storms. If this were to affect anything in alignment with your ambitions, then you want to be able to capture this. For me personally, with opportunities, again, external to me, there was an opportunity in what was happening with an increase in online education. There was also a shift in the marketplace to redefining education and self-help, and that becoming more action-oriented. So these are things that are happening outside of me. If you're applying this at all to what is happening in the economy or in the global economy, or another way, like I like to say this, is like, what is happening in the marketplace? What's happening in the market? And what are some shifts there that apply to your 3-year target? I just hired someone who had a strength in writing. She had particularly in Ayurveda. And so this shift, what's interesting about this, she has this, and at the same time, online education is changing, and more people are working online. Right? So actually, the number of contractors and the diversity of people I can hire that are working online, that has skyrocketed, meaning it's less important for me to find talent locally because it's easier for me to find talent online globally. Back in the day, I'll just reflect on an old 3-year target I had. This was maybe around, it was like right around when before Indy. It was right around like when I got married, when I had Indy. It was about a year after we got married. Is I had this target to go from having an in-person yoga studio in Driggs, Idaho, and having an in-person Ayurvedic medicine practice. And I wanted to shift that online in 2 years. Actually, I gave myself 24 months. It was a 2-year target that I had. That's the target that I wanted to hit. That was exactly the bullseye that I wanted to hit, is like, I can make the same or more money and be location independent. That's what it was called back then. I wanted to be able to surf and live part-time in Mexico and still grow yogahealer. Now, again, the opportunities were really different then than they are now, because online education wasn't as popular. Not as many people were redefining education, both for children and for adults. Not as many contractors were online, but there still were quite a few of that online. Fast forward to now, I actually have a strength in online team building. So my strengths have changed considerably with the marketplace. So interfacing with the global pandemic, I was actually pretty well suited to handle this. What I find often is if people don't think and it's so hard to sometimes do this, to like zoom your attention out into what's happening outside of you in your world. Like what's happening outside of you in the world that's kind of like right in front of you right now, to see like what's actually happening in the greater world of things, in the greater marketplace of things, because that's where we're going to start to see trends and the opportunities and the threats. These are trends that are happening. Now, these trends are going to happen whether or not you hit your 3-year target or not. Right? Whereas strengths and weaknesses, those are really personal and internal to you. So what happens is when we do a really good job with our strengths and our weaknesses in direct relationship to the 3-year target, we end up basically pulling critical issues right up to the surface. When we do this well, what can happen is we are on the road to really, really good, solid strategy. So it's so important that you very carefully consider what are the skills, the relationships, and the assets that you are going to need. Either you already have them and you might need to take them to the next level, or you don't have them, and if you don't obtain them or work towards them potentially very aggressively, then you won't hit your 3-year target. And that's really, as simple as this exercise is, that's all it really is. And you can get so good at this. I often will use this is called a SWOT. I'll often use a SWOT for any kind of problem solving. So for instance, when COVID first hit, one of my mastermind partners has a business that was totally event in-person based to Fortune 100 companies. And they needed to pivot. They needed to change what they were doing. They needed to change their strategy because they had to cancel all of their events. Now that happened to a lot of different companies. They were not alone in that. What I did is I just pulled out, again, a piece of paper like this, and I just did a SWOT with them. I was like, okay, what are your strengths given like the current economy? What are your strengths given the current opportunities? What are your weaknesses? What are the current opportunities? What are companies now looking for? And what we found was actually there was a big opportunity for them to pivot from what's called B2B, working from business to working B2C, which is business to consumer. They could actually go directly to clients to engage with their services. There was a huge opportunity in that. Of course, it's very competitive. So we could say the threat is that, well, there's massively increased competition as any market sector grows. What we face is an increase of like larger businesses who are just basically swallowing up smaller business, or blockchain, where a company can come in and take over your industry by having more market share and better technology and more resources to do that. So that was another word that can be really helpful to consider, is this word resources. What are the resources that you are going to need in order to do something? I'm going to use another example here with an event that I've been wanting to do, HealerCon, or do a big event in person for healers, by healers. That's very experiential. That involves action learning groups and liberating structures. And one of the things that I didn't have was the skills to be able to put on a large scale event. I've never done anything like that. But one of the things I did have was financial resources, because my company's been profitable, to be able to put that into buying someone else's skills to partner with someone else to run the event. So if you're looking at this, like, you might have critical relationships or critical skills or critical resources that you don't have that you're going to need. And if you don't have them, then those resources would show up more on the sides of the weaknesses. If you don't have skills, for example, I don't have a skill in event, basically logistics and orchestration. I don't have a strength in this case, I didn't have a strength in networking for live events. So what you want to make sure is that as you're doing this, and I recommend do a session of this and then take a break. Maybe that break is like a day, and then come back and look. And you've got to say, with this 3-year target, have I fully assessed the situation? And if you have, then it's going to be really easy to pull out the critical issues. They're just basically going to jump off the page, and we're going to go into critical issues and critical thinking next. If you've done a good job at this, then that will be a pretty fluid thing. If not, the critical issues will actually help pull out what are some of the potentially, usually the weaknesses or the threats that aren't there. I also recommend in this exercise, it can be really helpful to, once you've gone through this, to talk about it, to say, like, with another person, say, like, hey, this is my 3-year target. This is how I'm assessing my SWOT, my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then to listen. And it's so important to not be attached in this process, to really listen to the other person who's trying to poke holes and find more weaknesses, or actually identify strengths that you're not listing here that you can leverage as part of your strategy to hit your 3-year target. When you're doing this with another person, whether it's an accountability partner or it's as part of a mastermind group where you're doing this, it is important for the people helping you to keep their ear towards assets, relationships, skills, and resources. Now, in general, the way that I've learned this in small business strategy is that, like, really businesses that are under about 10 million in revenue, most of their critical issues are internal. So they're really going to come from being crystal clear on strengths and weaknesses. Businesses that are larger than that, the issues are going to be more external. They're going to be more in terms of the opportunities and the threats that are happening in the greater marketplace. And I honestly think this is a huge relief of being like, wow, there's a lot of stuff I don't really need to worry about. But what I do personally find is that there's a lot of opportunities. And those opportunities are ones I do want to pay particular attention to, because it's where I can step into really greater responsibility, greater affluence, greater impact, in the marketplace or in the global world that we all live in. So for me, for instance, one of the things that I'm seeing more and more now is people taking personal responsibility for their health, knowing that they can impact their own health. And that's part of the game that I play at yogahealer, is saying, like, actually, I can help you with that. So it is important to look at trends. For some of you, this is going to be way more important than for others of you. What's important now is that you get clear of applying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to your 3-year target. That, again, I'm just going to keep saying it, that you look at assets, relationships, skills, and resources. And each of those areas, that'll either help you get there or that'll be critical to you getting to that 3-year target. All right, party on with your SWOT.